Okay, a couple housekeeping notes as we record here late Wednesday afternoon. As promised, Ringer's Danny Kelly is in the house. But number one, Mike Vrabel, most recently famous for being the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, saying he would cut his dick off for a Super Bowl, is now going into the Patriots Hall of Fame, elected over Logan Mankins and Bill Parcells. Congratulations to him. I would probably cut my dick off if he heard that. Congratulations. He doesn't listen to this podcast, but he'll be speaking to the media on Thursday when this will drop. We'll get to speak with him, hear from him about what it means. 8 years in New England, 3 Super Bowl titles and a Pro Bowl. Certainly a fan favorite, long-awaited red jacket. Number two this week, we heard from Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated. Sidy Sow, whose name is going to screw me up until he is going into the Patriots Hall of Fame, either spelling or pronouncing it. They're going to try him at tackle, fourth-round kid. I mentioned on the last episode, I'm not entirely high on this idea. I think you might as well try him. But considering Sidy last started at left tackle in 2018, when I had a head full of hair and was partly covering college football, and not all of the Avengers movies were out yet, let's just see how that goes before we're, celebrating new franchise left tackle Sidy Sow. Last one, this episode of the Pats Interference Podcast brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. And without further ado, the aforementioned Danny Kelly, who is a friend of the podcast, friend of mine, always great to see him and talk draft. I asked him off the air if he's ready, to come out of hibernation the last few days. You have been working since the draft. You were going into hibernation now?
Yeah, I'm going to be starting my hibernation soon here, but we did a bunch of fantasy stuff. So we're switching immediately to the fantasy football guide that we have up at the Ringer. So we got our full 200 player rankings up there right now. And I'm doing a bunch of dynasty rookie ranks. So for all you dynasty freaks out there doing rookie drafts like me, look for my rankings next week. So yeah, that's fun stuff. And then after that, I'm out.
The Patriots notably did not take an offensive player until day 3. Kayshon Boutte, who you were going to fill us in on here. I know there's a lot of people excited. Is he anywhere close in those dynasty rankings?
I would say he's like a good 3rd, 4th round flyer at this point in terms of your rookie draft. I would not spend something more than that just because basically he's a 6th round pick and, the hit rate on those guys is historically very, very low. But to me, he is a perfect 6th round pick. I mean, he is exactly what you want in a 6th round pick. In fact, a lot of people coming into the 2022 college season, he was their number 1 ranked receiver. He was a guy that a lot of people thought might be a 1st round pick. There was a lot of hype around him. Going back to his freshman and sophomore seasons at LSU, he'd put up a lot of numbers. He'd led their team in receiving, big play guy. He had a track background. You could see that come into play after the catch. He was a good, run after the catch guy. He's playing all over the field, making a lot of touchdowns and making a lot of big plays. And then everything fell apart in 2022.
I almost stopped you there because this is gas on the fire that I need to put out first because it's already blazing across New England, this excitement for Kayshon Boutte, who notably fell to the 6th round because of character concerns, effort things. And again, like Sidy Sow, his best football or at a different position was in 2020. So for all of us getting excited about things that happened 3, 4, 5 years ago, A, get excited. It's the draft. It's why we have this event. But B, I want to see it first. If I was doing a 53-man projection, I would not have him on there. I don't think that's unfair. But since you dropped all that and you are the expert here, which is why you're on the podcast, I am in a losing position and backed in a corner. So let's get me out of this. Let's have some punter talk because Danny is on here today to take a deep dive into what the rookies' roles could be for the Patriots in year 1. I ran down every single pick and assigned a grade in the last episode. When this episode drops, I'll have a Q&A with Jim Nagy, who went deep on basically every prospect except for Christian Gonzalez and Kayshon Boutte because they were true juniors. So if you want to find out more, go read that. In the meantime, the obvious place, Bryce Behringer, Michigan State, 6th round punter. And I promise we will work our way to Christian Gonzalez. But it was funny when you and I spoke a couple of days ago, you mentioned like, oh yeah, I'll talk about the top 3 guys, not a problem. By the way, Bryce Behringer was the talk of the Senior Bowl out of Mobile. And I heard the same thing from Jim Nagy 2 days ago when he and I spoke for about 45 minutes. So how the hell, Danny Kelly, is a punter the talk of the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, I will say I don't spend very much time scouting specialists when I'm doing my draft guide for the Ringer. It's just not really part of my purview in that. And so I didn't go to the Senior Bowl expecting to really be watching the punting, but Behringer, every time he kicked the ball, everyone would sit up and be like, holy crap, look at the hang time on this thing. It was like, it became sort of like a bit and a joke amongst people kind of sitting in the stands and watching the practices. But I mean, the guy literally has, it's a howitzer leg. Like he was booming punts, coffin corners, really good hang time, to the point where people were really, noticing it. And I'd say that's a high bar to clear, because I don't really pay attention to the kickers and punters when I'm there. I'm typically watching receivers, skill players, defensive, offensive linemen, things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, he to me really stood out, and it was like this immediate thing where we were like, this guy's definitely getting drafted. He has a cannon for a leg. And obviously, better than I, but like Bill Belichick loves him some special teams, loves him guys that can come in and do special things in special teams. And so he is actually a pretty interesting pick, honestly.
He, among the many things I'll remember for my first season covering the team, 2018, Super Bowl year, tons of memories, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Gronk, was Belichick describing Rams punter Johnny Hekker as, quote, a weapon ahead of the Super Bowl. And this was not your perfunctory Belichick praise for the opposing players, the opposing teams before they play each other. Like, he actually believed that with every fiber of his being, and seems to think that Bryce Maringer's at least has the potential to be close to that. And I ran on the stats last time. It's worth repeating. Big Ten punter of the year, the biggest award in that conference, 49 yards per punt on average. And 46 for his career, 22 of 50 punts inside the opponent's 20, which doesn't seem to be a problem whether he's at midfield or his own 20-yard line. Can you just take us inside that scene, though, at the Senior Bowl? Because we all hear about, tons of media scouts like yourself, and you're obviously in the top tier of the draft analyst, but, everyone has the winners and losers from the Senior Bowl. You're on these, what I would assume to be bleachers in the stands in Alabama. Sometimes it's freezing. Sometimes it's too warm. They're warming up. You're taking notes and watching practice. And then at night, do the guys go to the same couple bars like we have at Indy when we go to the combine, but like in a more rural Alabama sense? Like, take us through that process just real quickly.
Yeah, so I would say if the bar in Indy that everyone goes to is High Velocity or Prime 47, Veets is the one at the Senior Bowl that everybody goes to, generally speaking. There's a couple different bars in downtown Mobile that people go to, but Veets is sort of this dive bar with really loud music. It's not as fancy as High Velocity, put it that way. But yeah, it is funny. That's where everybody kind of gathers at night, and then you get to catch up with whether it's media guys that you haven't seen in a long time, because these media events are like, you get to see the people they haven't seen really all year, so it's a fun time to catch up with everybody, but also compare notes on players, compare notes on things that you're hearing about different teams. It's a really good way to gather information for mock drafts and things of that nature, obviously, and try to piece together what's going to happen in the draft. So yeah, I mean, it's a very beneficial event to go to from that point of view, getting intel. And then if you're lucky, you kind of run into a random coach here or there that'll wander in. I want to say, well, I shouldn't name names, but there's definitely guys there that kind of come in, like NFL
Give us
guys,
a division.
like coaches. What's that?
Give us a division.
NFC South.
Okay.
GM wandered into Veets. I remember one night this last year. So that of course is immediately, people just like congregate around that guy, like almost immediately trying to get FaceTime. And but yeah, it's a lot of fun, and that's a good way to kind of get meet people in the league and get to know them in a little bit. And you can do that at practices too. But practices are, you mentioned it, like so unpredictable in terms of the weather. I would not have expected this, because I remember my colleague Danny Heifetz went for the first time this year, and I was telling him how cold it can get. And then the first day it was like 80 degrees and everybody got really sunburned. So it's like, I don't know. You never know what to expect.
But it's a big week. I mean, the Senior Bowl has only grown in profile. It's on the NFL Network. The practices are more important than the games. And how many times, I know I've heard and said myself that the Senior Bowl is, basically a training grounds for future Patriots. And you look at all the players they drafted. Behringer, Chad Ryland was there, Keion White. It's just a hotbed for prospects. So it's a really important week, and nice that you take us behind the scenes. Not to mention, and I don't say this just because you're coming on the podcast, but you've built up your own reputation as an elite draft analyst, and you're someone who does what other people give lip service to, which is get better every single year. And I'm not talking just about the player comps, which remain my favorite part, like the king of player comps. And you've heard this, and I'm surprised you're laughing because I'm the 10 millionth person to say it, but there's just incredible detail and care. So your guy gets bigger and bigger and bigger. If people haven't read it, go visit it now, because again, you can find a number of Patriots. Let's just do Kayshon Boutte as we work kind of from the down to the first tier. I don't believe he was in the draft guide, correct?
He was my.
He was, okay.
Well, you might not want to hear this, but I think he was like my 99th player.
Okay.
Yeah, my 99th player. I basically stuck him in there because I do think he has a high upside, and I wanted to write him up because I think he's one of the more interesting players in this draft. Frankly, like he coming into the year, a lot of people thought he'd be a first round pick, and then they changed the coaching staff at LSU. He had an injury which really affected him throughout the season. You could tell just on tape that he wasn't nearly as explosive as he was the year before and as a freshman. I mean, again, this is a guy with a track background. Like he's super explosive after the catch. And this year, you just didn't see that explosiveness, that twitch that you normally see. So there's not only sort of some of the issues that he was having, like with the coaching staff and off the field style things, he was dealing with a pretty major injury here. And so that showed up at the combine. He didn't test very well. He tested very poorly, in fact. Excuse me. And, so there's a lot going on here. Like you said, odds are he's probably not going to make the team. Odds are he's probably not going to do anything. But if for a 6th-round pick, especially when you're taking 12 guys in this draft, right? You guys have, I think it was a 12-man class.
Yes.
To me, this is the 6th round. Like that's nothing. Go for it. Try it. See what happens. And maybe he can take to the coaching here. Maybe he really is a good fit. And then you have what you could be like a huge steal in the 6th round. And so to me, this is a low risk, high possible reward type of move. He's a guy that I think has a ton of talent, has a ton of natural talent. He's still young. But he just kind of needs to put it all together and get back to where he was early in his career. And maybe he can do that.
So the worst case is he shows up and all of the, poor effort, non-invested in the weight room, which I think when you look at the testing numbers, and I mentioned this in my last episode, the injury certainly seemed to have affected that. He mentioned he was coming off a broken ankle, but also just said, hey, that's how I tested. Like he didn't make any excuses and say that's what led to the 4.53. I think it was the combine 3 cone that was well above 7 seconds. And so part of that might have been the work he put in. Worst case, he's just gone. For New England, he's Jeff Thomas from Miami from a year or two ago. Got a lot of hype, undrafted guy. The receiver, he's so talented. There's a need. And he's just another 6th-round pick who gets cut. Best case scenario, let me throw a grenade into this fire that you have thrown behind me and let me run away because, again, I'm not high on him yet. I want to see it first, and I think that's fair. But let's say he gets his act together. Let's say Brian Kelly, who told Todd McShay, he came around towards the end of last year, and he's healthy, and he's in the weight training program, and there's not a whole lot of competition, let's be honest, of just elite blue-chip talent ahead of him. His rookie year, what's his role? What's his ceiling, you think?
Good question. I think he's probably like a rotational guy, wide receiver 4, maybe. Get him in there. He's probably best in the slot. I think that was kind of what scouts were saying throughout this process this year, but he has played all over the field. He's played all over the formation. He's played outside, but he's almost a little bit like an explosive version of Juju Smith-Schuster in terms of he's probably just best fitting in the slot, run after the catch, make guys miss. I thought he's pretty good at tracking the ball down the field. He made some pretty spectacular catches near the sideline with guys draped on him in coverage. So he can get deep, but his game is more in the short and intermediate area, make a guy miss, explosive after the catch, that kind of thing. And so I do think that there's ways you can just get him the ball and let him do some things. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be, in year 1, a starter, but obviously that's like the best case scenario. But I think more realistically, if he does make the team, get him in there, get him some reps, get him, some opportunities to run after the catch and kind of work from there.
Now, the Ole Miss tape is the college tape that if I'm wrong, and again, just someone I want to see it first and see what he looks like in the field and be in a professional environment, that everyone will throw in my face because supposedly scouts are still talking about this 308-yard performance back in 2020 when he was a freshman, still standing as the SEC record. When you watch that tape, how would you describe watching that tape?
I mean, yeah, he looked like he's going to be a future superstar. And LSU has had, a line of guys, obviously Justin Jefferson's the best case, of guys that come in and just like larger than life personalities, larger than life on the field, just make guys look stupid. But yeah, like you said, that's the type of game as a true freshman, as an 18-year-old, you're watching that and you're like, this guy can do anything. He's like mossing guys. He's running past them. He's breaking tackles, just making it look easy. And yeah, you alluded to it earlier, but if you look at his numbers over the last 6, 7, 8 games of the season, they're pretty solid. He definitely was improving. He's starting to look a little bit more like himself. And so, there is a little bit of hope. That's again why I put him in my top 100. I didn't really expect him to get taken in the top 100, but I just think the upside to get back to what he was looking like as a true freshman, as a sophomore, is certainly there, and he's worth betting on that late. This is just such an easy bet for me.
Yeah, I like it. All right, let's move on. Marte Mapu, another Senior Bowl participant, practiced for 2 days, got hurt at the end of that second day, goes in the third round, 76 overall. I described him in my last episode as that small dog that's barking, thinking he's a German Shepherd, except for Marte Mapu is actually that German Shepherd, 6'3", 221 pounds. I asked Bill Belichick after the draft what I think are the two most pertinent questions about the selection. What is his role? And I got, we'll see. I don't really know. And two, can he, that was a bad Bill. Can he add weight onto his frame? Because I think that's really important for a player who looks like he has a future at the second level. And I asked Jim Nagy, again, a couple of days ago about that same issue. He says, look, if he came to the Senior Bowl at 221, I think he can get to 228. It's exactly where Kyle Duggar is, a little more fluid of an athlete. But Mapu just hits with such violence, like outsized violence for his frame. So he's a piece that, again, the worst case scenario is a project, better in theory than in reality that they don't have a home for. Best case scenario, his role as a rookie might take over that dime linebacker spot and then rotate in with the safeties if you have a surprise trade or cut candidate where, again, you've got 4 veterans there, Duggar, Phillips, Peppers, Mills possibly. What do you see as far as his fit? Like, we know what the player is. He's very exciting. He's got great tape, small school, all that. But at the end of training camp, where do you see him standing and fitting in the depth chart?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it with just the dime linebacker / hybrid safety type of player, a guy who's going to come in. He can line up off the ball in the second level. He did a lot of things where he's like sort of an overhang player / slot, guarding guys in the slot. He, like you said, he flies around. He hits hard. He's a tone setting type of player. I think that's why he got drafted where he got drafted, is because of the energy with which he plays, the versatility that he brings to kind of do a lot of different things, and so he's always ripping and trying to strip the ball, that kind of thing. I think that gives him the ability to kind of like do a lot of different things. I think he could line up and match up with tight ends. And so, I think it's just the versatility, the kind of do it all thing. I don't know exactly the role in the Patriots defense that he's best suited for, but I would say he's more of a safety than a linebacker, truly, just because of his size. But you can kind of line him up all over the formation, let him range around, let his instincts take over, that type of thing. Because he was, it was sometimes honestly kind of hard to find him in the defense because he would line up a whole different like places every time. So he's just one of those type of players that I think could be just a hybrid sort of positionless player in the back seven.
And if there's a defense where they value that more than any other defense in the league, I think it's the Patriots. I mean, they're playing more dime than anybody else. They're playing with 3 safeties as their base, one always close to the line of scrimmage. And I bring up Duggar because there's been a lot of discussion in Patriot circles and Twitter and radio about a lot of these picks seem to line up with players from the 2020 class who could be on their way out, a class led by Kyle Duggar.
That makes sense.
Could be headed into a Pro Bowl year. Now, I don't think that projection is as seamless because Duggar's much better in coverage. He's learned a lot better about how to cover tight ends. Mapu just might not have that speed. Didn't get to test because he tore his pec.
Right.
But he's at least in the mix, and I like fitting him in as a safety there. Again, you want to see it on the field. The good thing is he's given interviews, and his film speaks to this, where he's like, I live in the film room. I know what everyone in the defense is doing. And that's the way they teach the defense in New England. It's a very conceptual process of like, this is cover one. It's not you're outside, you have the X, follow him wherever he goes. It's like, this is where your help is, your leverage, the checks. This is what the safety's doing, even down to the defensive lineman. So he fits from a mentality standpoint. Again, that's why I said and reported.
That's interesting.
That he's Bill Belichick's guy. I mean, well, have you heard that elsewhere? Like that you said it's interesting. You're covering the whole league.
I mean, honestly, like I don't know how different teams coach it, but I think that's probably less common than for like most teams. It's like most teams are just like, here's your responsibility. Here's, what you got to do on the field, not going in and trying to like learn what multiple positions are looking at in any given play, or like knowing, like you said, just how to play a different position if you're called to do that at any given time. So I think, that's always been like a hallmark of Belichick, is like teaching and being a teacher and all that. But I think, I don't know if that's super common. I haven't heard that a ton.
One other hallmark of Belichick defenses, I wrote about this when I got to shadow or crashed a coaching clinic that he spoke at a couple of weeks ago, is there's still an element of just, we want to knock the shit out of you. Okay, we're coming to take your head off. And you see that in Marte Mapu's game. And I'll close with this before we go on to the top two prospects, Keion White and Christian Gonzalez. Jim Nagy relayed a story to me standing on the sideline, Senior Bowl practice. He's right there with Marte Mapu in front of him. Mike Tomlin is standing next to him. It's a 9-on-7 drill. And there's a fullback on the offensive side. It's a run. Mapu comes up and, quote, just buckles the dude behind the line of scrimmage, like sends him backward flying. The clip is on Jim Nagy's Twitter if you want to go find this. And Mike Tomlin, with his patented wide eyes, supposedly just stares at Jim and goes, this guy's making himself some money this week. And so, like, there will be moments in training camp. If you go down to Foxboro this summer and you're listening to this, just look for it. He'll have some horrendous number. I think it's supposed to be 52. Yeah, actually not so bad for linebacker / safety. But yeah, you know what I'm talking about. With
I think I saw Boutte or whatever had a number in the 50s too. I was like, oh my God, I forgot about the rookie rule with the Patriots. But
yeah, basically they go, and I tried to send this tweet out a couple of days ago, and it's just such a useless niche tweet that I screwed it up, including numbers that they have retired, that it wasn't worth it on the front end. But the premise is this: Bill says you need to earn your numbers. It starts at 50 for the first pick that they take, and it goes all the way back to the undrafted rookie. So it'll be 50, skip 56 and 57, which are retired, and go to like 64. But yeah, seeing Marcus Jones, all of 5'8", draped in this 52 jersey that's really wearing him last year.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So anyway, that will be Marte Mapu experience, the new 52, most likely, at Patriots training camp. The guy can hit. He's got those instincts. I think that'll carry you in the Bill Belichick defense. It's just, for me, given the size concerns, maybe what's the long-term ceiling for a player like him. But long-term, again, given Duggar's contract situation, how old Adrian Phillips is, there might be a role.
I'm reminded of a quote I heard. Daniel Jeremiah either went to one of the coaching clinics or somehow was working with Bill Belichick at some point in his career early on. And he took a note. He was taking notes, and he was relaying these notes that he took from this coaching clinic. I think it was. And he quoted Belichick of saying, and this is probably not verbatim, but something along the lines of, you can dominate the game from the safety position. And that always stuck with me. And like, when you're talking about him buckling the guy in the backfield, I think of like a guy like Cam Chancellor, or, like a Troy Polamalu, any of the greats that just brought like such a physical presence. There's like an intimidation factor that you can't really get with everybody. And so, yeah, that just really stood out to me. Like, you can dominate the game from the safety position. It just, when Bill Belichick says something like that, it kind of like sticks with you. And even though the position itself is sort of devalued salary wise in the NFL, but I do think that there's something there where, get a guy who can do a little bit of everything in coverage and against the run. And that can be like a huge advantage, a huge edge for you.
Yeah. I mean, they certainly think so, because again, I started covering the team in 2018, and they have been top 5 or maybe top 7 in safety spending. Yeah. Positional spending at the safety position every single year. And partly that's you got a guy like Devin McCourty, who's, top 10, top 12 safety, all of those different years, maybe just more of a free safety, but solid player you're going to pay. Though he probably took a pay cut down the stretch. And so they're still investing in that position from a draft standpoint. Obviously with Mapu, go back to Duggar, all these different players, and from a salary one. So there's a lot of value in there.
Yeah.
Question for you personally. Do you believe in emotionally hedging, Danny Kelly?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Excellent. Well, this ad read is for you, because the Celtics are offering you a chance to emotionally hedge against them after dropping game 1 to the Sixers earlier this week, a game that I covered and was equally shocked because they were 10-point favorites over at FanDuel. And right now, whether you want to bet on the Celtics or you want to emotionally hedge, you need to make a fast break over to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, where new customers can still get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet on the Celtics or not doesn't win. Great promotions every day. The app is safe and secure to use. Again, I use it. You get paid instantly, cash out, receive your money back typically in 1 to 3 days. There's basically no better place to bet on all the playoff action, NBA or NHL, than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/Boston and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Onward to Keion White, Georgia Tech, 46 overall pick. He was a player that I mentioned again in the last episode, was top 10 for Daniel Jeremiah. Where was he on your board? Daniel Jeremiah's first board, I should say. How did he evolve from your first big board to your last?
He was always, I would view him as a sort of end of first rounder. I had him at my 29th overall player. And so I kind of see him as big, long, super athletic, but a little bit raw. You know, a little bit, he needs to develop a little bit, but he's also a little older. He's 24 years old. He spent 6 years, I believe, in college. And so there's a few things that you can ding about his like profile as a prospect, but at the end of the day, he's 6'5", 285 pounds, really long arms, really explosive, really twitchy, pretty flexible as a rusher, and also versatile ability to kind of run, you know, pass rush from the outside, go back into the inside, you know, plays with pretty good leverage. He has, I thought his hump move and like a spin move, he has a couple burgeoning moves that I thought he could be really effective with at the next level. But yeah, obviously I think Daniel Jeremiah admitted it. He kind of like jumped the gun a little, and then, you know, he saw Keion White play at the Senior Bowl. It wasn't quite as dominant as he was hoping, and he eventually moved him down a little bit, which I think is fine. I think that's something that happens kind of as you go through the process. And so, but yeah, I mean, I always viewed him as sort of like an end of first round, early second round type player. And so, you know, I thought getting him, what was it, 46? I thought that was a good value.
Yep. Yeah, and they supposedly had a first round grade on him in this small group of players that when they traded back from 14 to 17th overall, where they got Christian Gonzalez, who was at the top of that group, obviously. And then they made some calls to the back end of the first round, seemingly about Keion White, who I checked in with somebody else outside the team who works for another organization, who said they were turned off. And this is something that's been reported also by Mike Reese, by his interview process. Like, the guy that you saw on television with this very Belichickian, straightforward,
right,
unemotional stare is who the guy is everywhere he goes. And for some teams, it's going to turn you off, not willing to connect or sell himself on that, which told the Patriots, obviously, is his size. He is a jumbo edge player. And honestly, that business approach fits with them. Now, I've dinged other players in this class, like City Sow and Amir Speed, for what you just said. They're either 23 or 24. They played 6 years in college. The production wasn't all that great. How much more development can there really be? The difference is his first year at Old Dominion playing defensive line after being a tight end caught the attention of folks like Jim Nagy on tape. And so I think what you're kind of speaking to here, those burgeoning moves, like, he doesn't have a plan totally when he pass rushes, but because he's a freak athlete, he can get away with it. And once you give him a plan, it's not sky's the limit, but like, that's a reliable down to down player with a ton of tools in his toolbox.
Yeah, I think, and that's a great point. The difference between if he had been a defensive end his whole life and he just never figured it out, never developed any plan, never developed any moves, that'd be like a bigger red flag to me. But the fact that he literally played I believe he played his first year at tight end, and then as a sophomore he switched to defensive end. And he kind of moved around the line. He's still developing, still trying to figure that out. Obviously, it's a different mentality when you're on defense than you're on offense. And so, you know, I think, yeah, there's still some room for improvement. You never want to draft a guy who's already hit his ceiling in college. And I don't think that's the case with Keion White. I think he's still got room to improve, even though he is an older prospect. And so that's, you know, some people may see that as an excuse. I think that's more of like a reason why it took him a little longer to develop. And so, you know, he's really strong, really twitchy, really athletic, really versatile, like everything you look for in a defensive lineman, especially the Patriots. It seems like this is kind of a guy that just perfectly fits their style and philosophy on defense. And I thought that, that I was actually going to ask you a little bit about the reaction when he was drafted, because I was like, I think some people could, I personally viewed it as like, oh, that's a chip on the shoulder. Like, he's pissed he fell this far. But I, of course, don't have all the context. So I thought that it was very interesting hearing you say that, like, that's kind of how he is just as a person. He's just like super serious and business-like, or whatever you want to say. I thought that was very fascinating just watching him. He didn't even react. He's like Bill Belichick winning the Super Bowl. He just stood there like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, he was in a Belichick lab some far off way, or actually just down in Atlanta at Georgia Tech being built. And this is what got spit out. And it was funny too, because listening to him in the conference call where we speak with all these kids about 30 to 45 minutes after they get drafted, ask a question, like, he was very open. You could hear the expression in his voice, but it wasn't some sort of, you know, spite or vengeance for getting drafted 46 when he was billed as a first round pick in most places, like late first round pick, like you had him, and was also invited to the draft. And there were multiple questions about, like,
that's another thing.
Congrats on your best moment of your life. How was yesterday one of the worst? And his answer was like, I'll never get that experience again. That was fine. I'm glad I got to go. Yeah, I had to fly home today, but I got drafted. And so from what I heard about him not being so expressive and what we saw, it strangely didn't line up over that call. But I think ultimately when he gets to New England, along with a lot of other rookies who were just kind of told to shut up and play, specific to the media, which it's their prerogative. It's their media policy. He'll fit in fine. On the field, like you mentioned, very versatile as far as playing spots along the defensive line, really appeals to the Patriots. I saw him running, with running backs on wheel routes and staying step to step, which is really encouraging. I look at his rookie year, though, it's probably a rotational interior rusher, a guy who's not going to supplant Matt Judon, obviously, or Dietrich Wise, who's a little bit longer, less powerful version maybe of White. I don't know how you see that comp. But a guy who, again, in a year or two could certainly supplant one of them as an edge starter because he's got a very well-rounded game.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Again, it is sort of a weird contradiction that he's older and he needs development, but he does need development, I think. And that's probably why he ended up being the 46th overall pick. But he landed in what I think is like a great spot for him to do that. They're not probably going to need him to rush in and be like this huge impact player in year one. He can kind of learn the chops and learn what they're asking of him, like the quote unquote do your job whole thing. And so this makes a lot of sense to me. I was sitting actually by Bill Simmons when he got picked, and I was like, yeah, you're going to like this guy. I think he's really good. He's like really athletic, needs to develop a little bit, but yeah. And they didn't know what to make of the whole like straight face reaction. But yeah, it was, to me, he's a great pick right there. And obviously I had him as a value at that spot. So exciting for him. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he does there.
Me too. And just to go back to the age thing, because again, I've said that I've gone back and forth with, there are a lot of older players in this class. I think this is still partly a function of just COVID. Everyone had to freeze. We all waited for a year, and then we're just suddenly a year older when we go back to real life. That's still true of these prospects. And I think you've even seen it from guys who were rookies in 2020, didn't get the full rookie year experience. Duggar, Uche, this delayed, post-hype breakout for players like this. Same thing in college. Like, he's 24. The difference is, if you like the player, you call him mature. Okay. This is like the cozy versus cramped description of an apartment. If you don't like him, he's just old. That man useless. He's past his prime. You can't develop. My thing is, it's not so much the overall age, it's how many years you spend at your position. That's where I see like Amir Speed, 6 years, and he had 6 or 5 pass breakups at Michigan State, solid school. But 6 for your career in 6 years is not going to be a lot of hope for you to play long-term in the NFL. Anything on that strike you as far as Keion White goes, or what else his role could be besides kind of a rotational pass rusher in year one?
No, I think that nails it. I mean, I'm curious. I was going to ask you, do you know what weight they want him to play at? Like, did they mention anything? Because I think he's kind of gone up and down in weight during his college career. And so I'll be curious too, to see whether they ask him to kind of bulk up to like a 290 or go down to like a 265, 270 to get like more on the edge. I'll be curious about that too.
Their edge rushers the last 10 years that they've drafted have averaged about 6'3", 6'4", and 264 pounds. I think it's 264.2. So he's way above that. Like, he is a jumbo outside linebacker. But I think as long as he can play at that weight, like, that's part of the other part of the Keion White pick, is that he fits in this new mold of they're picking athletes. Like, they're after traits now. It's not just your instincts and your IQ and how hard you work and you make up for your lack of athleticism because you'll diagnose plays a little bit more quickly. No, Christian Gonzalez, Keion White, Marte Mapu, athlete. So if he can function and run at that, size, that's fine. If I had to pick between the two, add a little bit more weight or lose some, because this dude is rocked up. I would say probably lose a little bit, but again,
I would agree.
They've had Dietrich Wise drop into space for better or worse, and he's a little bit more awkward, like long-limbed kind of guy. And White ran a 4.6, 4.7, I think it was. So at 285, that's great. But if I had to pick between the two, given their averages, and he's just 6'5", it's not like he's a couple inches taller. Right, that's where the weight is going. It's just one more than the average edge guy.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's get to the diamond, the crown jewel of the class, Christian Gonzalez. Top 10 on your board, a lot of other places, a guy who slipped. I mentioned, concerns maybe about ball skills or tackling. In my opinion, he solved those. 4 interceptions as a junior, only 3 missed tackles, according to PFF. If you want to critique anything, and this is something that's come out lately, so tape against Georgia. If you can find a defensive player at great tape against Georgia, like, congrats to you. Right. This past year, 2-time national champions for a reason. That game was also the first of the season in a new defense with new teammates. The athletic traits are there. Another guy who can make up for his mistakes, unlike other players in this roster, just because he runs faster and he's quicker and all these different skills. So if they can coach, they should be able to coach up Christian Gonzalez. I don't think he'll start week 1 if I had to bet right now on May 3rd. But I think by the end of the season, yes, he's a starter because that's the kind of talent he is. And that's the kind of the need they have at the position, not only just from, the players at cornerback and the talent, but just the size.
Yeah. Yeah. He's such an interesting guy. He was, I believe he ended up as my corner 1. I mean, he's just so well-rounded. He's got good size, good length, insane athleticism. Obviously, he's super twitchy, super athletic. He ran, I want to say they clocked him at like 23 miles an hour. On the GPS, which is unheard of. That's like insanely fast. And
that's Michael Scott going with the car behind him and counting 31 as his actual time. But that's right. Christian Gonzalez in real life. 23.
Yeah, so to me, when I watched him, the thing that struck me and stuck out to me was that he's just so calm and poised in coverage. He like never panics. He's always kind of like waiting for the opposing receiver to like make his move. He doesn't like open the hips or whatever too early. And so he just always is right in position. He's always in the hip pocket of the receiver. I thought he could play off and in man coverage pretty well. Like he has the versatility to do different types of things in terms of coverage. Yeah, I just like the one, I don't remember exactly the play. I don't remember who they were playing, but I have one play stuck in my head where he just gets himself in the hip pocket of the receiver and just absolutely dominates the rep from start to finish. Like he runs the route for the receiver, and then it broke up the pass. And I just think of that when I think of Christian Gonzalez, because he's just so calm, collected, and obviously trusts his speed. He trusts his makeup ability in terms of if he like missteps one time, he has the speed and twitchiness to like catch up to the receiver and not let him get too far away, not give up a cushion. And then, he's just got good instincts in coverage, good instincts in zone. So I think he can do it all. He's just a really well-rounded corner.
Yeah, it's hard to find flaws in the ointment, or flies in the ointment, flaws in his game,
right,
like all of that. It's just, again, people harping on the physicality. If you can get a guy to the ground, that's what I care about. How hard he goes. Like all the things you love about Marte Mapu is great, especially considering he's undersized. Not needed at the position that Christian Gonzalez played. He doesn't need to be able to flex between the outside and the slot, though he has covered a little bit in the slot or bounce back to safety. He can be so elite at what his job is, his position, that it can keep him on the outside. And there might become a day where he's shadowing number 1 wide receivers. Again, I don't think that's going to happen as a rookie, not with Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, and Garrett Wilson all in the division. But this was as much best player available as it was position in need. And those are the exact picks that you want to make. But if he does struggle, I mean, again, because the game is just so much more advanced. He had the 2 years at Colorado, started as a freshman and sophomore. Even at Oregon, staying within the Pac-12, the level of competition isn't what he would have seen even in the SEC, where Kayshon Boutte is a 6th-round pick. Does any of that concern you? Just the level of jump? It's not FCS to FBS, and the traits are there, but the kid's not even 21 yet.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're trying to figure out reasons why he could be a surprisingly struggle or whatever, yeah, that's one of them. I think you alluded to it. Like he didn't have an interception before 2022. He did have 4 this last year, but the ball production has not been consistent. And so, he has to prove that, number 1, that wasn't a fluke this last year, that he can find the football, catch the football, have the awareness of when to turn his head and all that stuff. I think that's going to be one thing he has to prove. He's an aggressive player, so he tends to get a little grabby. I think he'll have to, clean that up in terms of like not getting flagged for penalties and things like that at the next level. But I don't know. To me, I look at him, I'm like, he has the skill set to succeed. And I trust the way that the Patriots coach their defensive backs. And so I think he landed in a great spot to have his traits and his skill set developed and, do everything there. So I'm pretty confident. I obviously had him as a top 10 pick, so I really like him. But yeah, I think he's, he have to clean up some things when you get to the next level, not be grabby, prove that he has those ball skills. But I think overall he has all the traits that you really look for at the position.
Yeah, there's no consistent, branch of the route tree that's going to give him an issue where he can't run with the 9s, straight vertical routes, any quick in breakers. He's got appropriate amount of quickness. He's physical enough at the line. Like, those are fine. And part of me was thinking, as I'm watching this, just going, okay, if he was at Alabama or you put him in a different uniform, does that change the scouting where it's just kind of an Oregon kid? There's like this West Coast maybe bias that it's a little bit softer. The players are smaller. Like, I've seen it when they do these Big Ten, Pac-12 crossover games, bowl games. You just go, that offensive line has 20 pounds on him per person versus, pick your Pac-12 team. And then I'm thinking too, like, his breakout as a junior, maybe this was just his natural progression all along, was under Dan Lanning, former defensive coordinator at Georgia, who brought over a lot of those Georgia coaches with him to Eugene. So not only is he in a pro-style defense under Kirby Smart, of course, learned under Nick Saban, and we're getting further and further away here from, the Kevin Bacon of college football. But the point is, it's not all that hard to imagine what he would look like with Alabama-esque coaching or an Alabama-esque system, because that's what he did in his best season and will be doing here in New England. So again, I'm high on him. Just like the rest of the rookies, my default is I want to see it on the field. I think he'll look excellent in the spring when we get a couple of OTA practices and then mini camp. But the test will be, how do you deal with the physicality, the nuances of the route running that you're just not going to get in college with smaller route trees and obviously, younger, more inexperienced type players. So what was your comp for Christian Gonzalez?
I had AJ Terrell.
Nice.
AJ, how do you pronounce that? AJ Terrell?
Maybe we should go find that NFC South GM who's just hanging out at the bar, being a big celeb, and ask him.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I just think he's got the ability to play both man and zone, I think is what stood out to me. And his just ability to get into the hip pocket of a receiver and basically run the route for him. Sticky in coverage, absolutely no issue with speed or twitchiness or change of direction, fluidity. I think, if you're looking for like picking nits or whatever, yes, he might be not the most. He's definitely not Devin Witherspoon in terms of like physicality and all that.
That dog in him, yeah,
right. But at the same time, I thought he played plenty aggressive. So I like everything about him.
Yeah. One other thing, I just lost it, which is super not helpful in a podcast. As far as like him being a week one starter, I suppose. Oh, this is it. John Jones was the Patriots' number one corner last year. And there's a real question of what position John Jones will play this upcoming season. And that's a question I don't think the Patriots even have answered, even if they have a gut decision, because you could put him back home at nickelback, where he's been very successful, and start Christian Gonzalez and Jack Jones. You could put him at free safety, where he is going to have the fastest time speed of any of their safeties or corners, has the most experience in this system as the longest tenured player in their secondary. So if he bounces back to safety, where they throw him in nickelback and say, sorry, Marcus Jones, you're just going to have to wait another year, that opens up the spot for Christian Gonzalez. If not, and he stays outside, where he was good, not great a year ago, then he's got to battle Jack Jones for that spot opposite him. And Gonzalez has the better traits. He's much younger, still have more time to be developed. Jack Jones, another one of the oldest prospects in last year's class. Any thoughts there as far as if it comes down to Jack Jones from what you saw from him last year and at Arizona State versus first round pick Christian Gonzalez walking in here?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Honestly, they're very different, obviously.
Yeah.
But I would tend to lean that Christian Gonzalez would be the guy to go with there. I didn't watch a ton of Jack Jones, to be totally honest, last year, so I don't have like a in-depth scouting report to offer. But yeah, I would say just Christian Gonzalez, like size, speed, length, kind of has Jack Jones beat in those categories. So I would probably lean that direction.
Look, a lot of people didn't watch Jack Jones last year because he was supposed to go in the 7th round or undrafted. And the Patriots said, oh, no. And it seems like at least the start of his career, mind you, he ended the season on the suspended list, that they were right because he was exceptionally talented, couple of picks, both excellent interceptions as far as, the read on the play, break on the ball skills, another man cover corner, a little bit lighter. But we'll see, because I think part of the reason that you look at that corner depth, it's not only, okay, all of them are 5'9" or 5'10" or shorter, but I don't know if you can entirely rely on a guy like Jack Jones long-term. So Christian Gonzalez is here. Expect him to start, whether it's week one or not. He should be at some point here in his rookie year. All right, on to the mailbag. You were not prepared for these, though. I told you.
Mailbag.
Mailbag. Real quick. To have a Mac take, there's always a Mac question. Long term, there's been a lot of turmoil. I've said multiple times on this podcast, I want to put it behind us, but now I'm going to put it in your lap. So this is a hybrid question from Kamal and Fuad, who basically want to know, Do you think Mac Jones will be the Patriots quarterback beyond this season? And if not, where do they go from there? See, now you get to suffer because look, the answer is no one knows. The Patriots don't know. Mac Jones doesn't know. But if you had to guess, Danny Kelly.
I think that, yes, he'll be the starter after this year. I think I'm like predicting a bounce back season for him this year. I think Bill O'Brien's going to be immensely helpful for that. I think that the weapons around him are going to be significantly upgraded. And so I could see him getting back on track. To me, like, honestly, if you look at last year, and, no offense, of course, to Bill Belichick, who's the greatest football coach of all time, but like, they did not put him in a good situation with Matt Patricia as the offensive coordinator. Like, we could see that immediately. That was the most obvious thing. And so, to me, you can't ignore the fact that was what happened. That literally happened. They had a guy who was largely a defensive coordinator come in and be the offensive coordinator or whatever, just the way that they went about that with Joe Judge. It just didn't make any sense. And so it was not surprising to see him struggle. And I think this year we'll kind of get back to what we saw more closely to Mac as a rookie. That being said, everything you hear, again, people talk at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine, wherever, there is rumblings that the team doesn't really like Mac Jones. So, I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know if they have other options. If they find another option, maybe they will go that route. Bailey Zappe's still kind of hanging around and is probably going to challenge him a little bit in training camp in the offseason. But if I had to guess, like, the odds are, I think Mac Jones will continue to be the starter. But again, it wouldn't really surprise me if he isn't either.
Let me that's you dumping it back into my lap. I don't know. We'll see. Follow not me for the answer. Did you hear of anything called Zappe fever all the way out there in Seattle?
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know.
I mean, I do know, like, when I was watching games, it felt like the fans really wanted Zappe to be playing and not Mac Jones, which I thought was wild. I'm like, I remember like texting Bill being like, how have Patriots fans already given up on this guy after having such an incredible rookie season? Yeah. I thought that was a little bizarre, but it is what happened, I feel like.
Yeah, it was a fun period just having a name, a kind of gimmick in what was otherwise a miserable season, and even directly asking Bailey, as I did, like, have you heard of this thing called Zappe fever, which I didn't know if it was just like midday radio talk fodder, but it's on Twitter. Let's see if he reacts. And he said no, but he was smiling, and I go, Bailey, you're smiling. He was like, okay, maybe a little bit. So yeah, I don't want to.
He's searching his name on Twitter.
Yeah. But I'll just say this. I think your point about what are their options next year is the most important question about this whole thing, because we could talk about the rookie contracts and the benefit of having extra money to put it on the roster. They've had that now for 2.5 seasons. You look at the roster, it's still about average, I think, relative to the rest of the league. I think it's very solid. It's one of the most well-rounded rosters in the entire league. But ultimately, if they can upgrade at the right price, they'll do it. If they can't, they won't. How many upgrades are there available over Mac Jones? Well, you're talking about the 10, 12, 14 best quarterbacks in the league. Teams just don't get rid of them. Okay.
Right.
So that's where I end up. That's what I said all this offseason. That's where I'll be on next year. All right. 2 quick ones. We kind of already answered this. Jordan asked, can Mapu function as a linebacker at the NFL level / in this defense at his current size? You and I both say basically in dime packages, sure. I mean, Mac Wilson was there. Granted, Mac Wilson is 2 inches shorter and 7 to 9 pounds heavier at 6'1", 230. But yes, I mean, he I think it would just be a matter of health, because he's playing a lot more games against heavier, faster, more explosive players, obviously, than he was in Sacramento State. But in a specialized role, yes. Is Juwan Bentley 2-down thumper? No.
Right. Exactly.
Cosign. All right. One that is probably beyond both of our purviews, but it's an interesting conversation. Gary wants to know which 2020 draft class member, Duggar, Uche, or Mike Onwenu, is most likely to sign an extension before the season. Then he has his own commentary, which I'm not going to add because this podcast is for my commentary of my guest commentary. But I will tell you this is interesting because I know Duggar expressed an interest in changing agents this offseason. That's not something I've reported or written because the agent change has not happened, but clearly he has his eye on an extension, and I think should. As a guy who came into the league a little bit older than most as a prospect and has proven that he can hang and play a lot of different positions and fill a lot of different roles. So my answer would either be Duggar if he really wants to stay, or Onwenu, because I look at Josh Uche playing a premium position with 13 or 14, however many sacks it was last year, half of them against the Colts and Cardinals, basically. There are a lot of teams
Who's
that will
counting?
pay for those amount of sacks. And that I think is going to price the Patriots out ultimately. Who knows? This is still 9-10 months away. But my answers would be Duggar and Onwenu, probably in that order.
Yeah, that was my answer. You stole my answer. I was gonna say Uche. Sacks getting paid. That's like you make sacks, you get a lot of money. And so, if he can kind of follow up with what he did last year, this year and kind of get those numbers up again, maybe he won't match what he did last year, but have a solid number of sacks. He's going to be, a lot of teams are going to be very interested in that. So I'd say he's the most likely to leave just because, like I said, the sacks above anything really, other than maybe like touchdowns, like that translates to money, in free agency. So that could be a reason that he leaves.
You want him in Seattle? Noted Seahawks fan, Danny Kelly.
I liked him coming out, man. I mean, he's a little undersized. The Seahawks drafted a guy kind of similar in style to him in Derek Hall in this draft. Kind of like a hard charging undersized. Well, not super undersized, but like a little undersized. He's not quite as small as Uche in terms of height, but a little undersized, a little under height, but hard charging, super twitchy, athletic guy. Has some similarities to Uche, but I liked him coming out. I thought he would be the type of guy who could come in and be a rotational player in the pass rush and kind of do what he does.
We're really coming full circle here because he was also someone that people sat in the stands in rainy or 80-degree Mobile and watched at the Senior Bowl, where he was coming off the edge, twitchy as all hell as he still is right now, play a little bit off the ball, which I know helps out the Patriots during that process, in addition to playing a couple different roles at Michigan, but didn't play more than 52% of the snaps in the season there, has yet to eclipse 40% here, and I think has his role as a situational pass rusher, which very important. Those downs of situations or high leverage situations that mean a little bit more than 2nd and 8 where he's not playing. But ultimately, I think it's just not high enough to retain him. But we'll see. I will say this: my official stance is the Patriots should be interested in retaining all of them. They need to keep all of the young talent they can in their building, and that 2020 class looks better by the year, and it's because of those 3 guys. So that's it. Any a final take, Patriots related thought? We could do big season prediction, or just I like this player, they didn't grab this guy.
Let me see here. I don't know. Give me the fantasy take on the Patriots this year. Like, who's going to be? You think Juju Smith-Schuster's the actually? Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Is there any world in which Tyquan Thornton is actually productive next year? Because I kind of liked him coming in. I did not think he was going to be a 2nd round pick, but I did like him. Super fast. And he flashed a little bit in the early part of the year.
I think there's a world that exists. I might need to check with one Kane the Conqueror to find out for the Marvel fans out there. But here's the most important part about that. He'll get his opportunity. They traded up for this guy. It wasn't just that he was a 2nd round pick. They traded up to go get him and see something in Tyquan Thornton, who got a ton of snaps last year, will have even more this year if he earns them, and had a good camp. It wasn't great. I was very patient with Tyquan Thornton when everyone was so excited because, again, part of the Patriot watching experience is you get to feel like a beat dog at certain positions where athletic linebackers really stand out. You're like, Raekwon McMillan's kind of average speed and athleticism. Tyquan Thornton's speed is out of this world compared to almost anybody. I just want to see a little bit more well-rounded game. The details of his routes were better, where there was a touchdown he missed by 2 yards because he cut off his route just shy of the goal line. And a couple games later, I can't remember the exact game because that Arizona game was in December, ran the same route, proper depth, scored. Like, those improvements are there. You need to see more consistency from him. So there's a world, but he fantasy wise, very, very late round flyer, kind of like lottery ticket.
Right. Well, I'm talking more like dynasty, but
dynasty. Yeah, sure. I mean, what the hell? I mean, I mean, if you're someone who took a pick on N'Keal Harry, like you can afford to, invest in the Tyquan Thornton experience for a little longer.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah, you're good. All right, Danny Kelly, thank you for your time. Good luck in hibernation. I hope you enjoy a nice long vacation. We get to do this sooner than next year's draft, and hopefully see you along the way. Pats and Seahawks don't play, but you're around. You do excellent work on the draft and fantasy. It's a blast to listen to you, read your work, and this is one of the most fun episodes I've had in a long time. So I appreciate you, buddy.
Well, I thank you very much for all the kind things you said about the draft work, and anytime, man. Let's talk soon.
You got it.